What's up, guys? Welcome to a new episode of the Young Guns podcast. The 2024 NHL Entry Draft has concluded. It was a fantastic draft with a lot of surprises in terms of the players sliding, and also what some of the decisions made by teams where some players were kind of reaches at certain points. But we've seen that in the past, but I think this year we saw it a lot more often. But with that being said, when the draft happens, there's also trades that happen throughout the draft. And day two of the 2024 NHL Entry Draft is where it happened. We saw multiple blockbuster deals, also with some being a little bit more minor, but we just wanted the draft to pass in order to properly conduct a breakdown and a little recap on all the trades that happened. So the first trade that happened today was Mikhail Sergachev. So two-time Stanley Cup champion, played with the Tampa Bay Lightning, signed the 8-year deal a couple of years ago, dealt with some health issues. And, a lot of, people were saying, the Tampa Bay Lightning are kind of, or somewhat on a decline, especially with, top name players like Alex Killorn, Andrea Palat, not being part of their core anymore. And, they somehow, still were able to compete these last 2 years and made the playoffs. But, with Steven Stamkos most likely hitting, the free agency market, they need to clear up some cap space. So they make two trades. The first one is, get rid of Mikhail Sergachev. And then the other one is trading Tanner Jeannot. So we're going to start with the first one. So Mikhail Sergachev, $8.5 million in terms of salary, heading to Utah. So they get their first, top caliber defenseman. And if I'm not mistaken, this is their first move as the Utah Hockey Club since, moving from Arizona to Utah. And they trade away J.J. Moser, Connor Geekie, a 7th-round pick in 2024, which was 199, and they selected Noah Steen and a 2025 second-round pick. So, Zach, what are your thoughts essentially on this trade? Were you shocked by it? And what do you think Utah's cooking up here?
Well, we do know, because it's been reported for the past week or so, that Utah have been in the market for a top pairing defenseman. And, it's something that for them, with the transition from Arizona to Utah, they really wanted to add some spice and, market this team to something that has its own identity now, playing in Utah. And to do so, they wanted to attract some high-level talent. And they've done so by trading for Mikhail Sergachev, top pairing defenseman, somebody who's been, very serviceable for Tampa pretty much since close to his rookie season. And after, obviously the trade, he was drafted by Montreal, traded for Jonathan Drouin, and has had many great playoff runs and regular seasons playing with Tampa. So reliable, power play guy, could play both special teams. Could be relied on to play heavy minutes, and he got signed to a big contract. But like you said, Tampa is looking to alleviate some cap space to make other moves. There's also the fact that Ryan McDonough was traded to Tampa earlier in the offseason, traded back. There was no salary retained in the process by Nashville, so Tampa is taking on the full extent of that contract. I don't know if you could pull up Tampa's salary cap situation to see kind of where everything is, how everything will line up a little bit logistically. But for Tampa, they do get a great young defenseman in J.J. Moser, a young 24-year-old Swiss defenseman who's had years in the NHL, who's still growing, and gets a different opportunity. Will definitely be getting some top 4 minutes there. Connor Geekie was an 11th overall pick by the Arizona Coyotes in 2022. There's some promise there, and they get 2 draft picks in the process. I think for both teams, obviously Utah is getting a cornerstone defenseman for years to come, and he is signed, like you showed before, Mikhail Sergachev until 2031, I believe. And for Tampa, they're alleviating some pressure, and they're getting assets What's going to be interesting now, I don't want to say like, okay, this team won, let's trade this team, or this team won. What's going to be interesting now is how Tampa, maybe you could, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think, what's interesting is how's Tampa going to approach the rest of the offseason? What kind of moves are they going to be making? Are they going to be targeting veteran free agents? Are they going to try to get younger? Maybe retool for something that kind of hints at the retool for like maybe a year or two.
This is going to be a retool, in my opinion, and here's why. You
Yeah,
get JJ Moser, who is a little bit younger than Sergachev, but definitely a lot cheaper. He is an RFA, but you could easily sign him to a long-term contract, which Julien Brisebois loves to do. He loves signing guys to long-term contracts. We've seen it
of course.
multiple times these last couple of years. JJ Moser, I see him making about what, $2 to $3 million, maybe on an 8-year contract. Moving forward, he's going to be Sergachev's replacement. You have a lot of UFAs, but are they all quality UFAs that are walking? Well, Anthony Duclair was added at the trade deadline. He's going to walk. Tyler Mott, depth guy, easily replaceable. Austin Watson, same thing. Steven Stamkos, I think he does end up walking. I think he's gonna sign elsewhere. There's talks that Nashville is very interested in the Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah,
In terms of Calvin Dehan, Dumba, and Hayden Fleury, those are all depth defensemen that could be easily replaced by younger players in their system, but also come free agency. And not only that, but the biggest news of all that was announced today is that their main priority right now is to sign Jake Gensel, who was offered a long-term deal by the Carolina Hurricanes, but has not said anything yet. They matched his salary, they matched the years that he wanted, and he's still thinking about it. So if he rejects that deal and he becomes a UFA on Monday, Tampa is going to be probably the top candidate at this point because they're going to try to find a Steven Stamkos replacement. And if you want a pure sniper, Jay Gensel is your guy, and he's a lot
yeah,
younger than Steven Stamkos. So this is why I'm considering this a retool, because the pieces that they got or they will get are going to be significantly younger than the guys that are walking. Um, will Tampa still be a top dog? Well, if they play their cards right, then yes, I do believe they're going to be fighting for a wild card spot. Will they make the playoffs? Well, we'll see, because there's a lot of other teams that are getting better, and the offseason has just started, so we don't know what else other teams have in store. But you also get a young player in Connor Geekie, who I would have thought that him and JJ Moser would be the future of Utah. But unfortunately, Utah wants to win now. And I don't know if they're making these moves under the Utah brand to kind of like spark excitement within the fan base and within, the city. But I don't think if they were still under Arizona, they would have made these moves. And I don't think Sergachev and Marino would be interested in playing for the Arizona Coyotes as opposed to the Utah
yeah.
Hockey Club. So
You,
there's a
new
lot
new ownership is a factor as well, right?
and it's showing. It's showing that the Smith family is very interested in turning Utah into a very competitive team, the same way that Vegas was a contender out of the gate. They made it to the Stanley Cup Finals year one, and they won a Stanley Cup within the first 5 years of existing. And the Seattle Kraken, it's been a different story. They made the playoffs 1 out of 3 seasons, but they've been pretty strong in terms of their team as well for an expansion team. So I like the moves for both teams, more for Utah than Tampa, but I understand what Tampa's doing here.
Yeah,
They're trying to get younger, and they cleared up $11.5 million in cap space, which we're gonna get into the Tanner Jeannot trade in a second here. But as of right now, they have projected $16.5 million, which that means they could be big players at this year's
yeah.
free agency.
Well, they get younger and cheaper on their blue line, that's for sure. By opting for a guy like JJ Moser, who's 24, as opposed to Sergachev, who's 28, and you got big contracts already for Eric Cernak, Ryan McDonough, Victor Hedman. But this is a team, right? You still have any team that has Victor Hedman, Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, Vasilevsky, if he could get back to his game, that's a team that is looking to contend every year. But like you said, I think retool and maybe like this is, I don't see as a retool. Like, okay, they won't make the playoffs next year. I think they're gonna be competing, depending on some moves. But I think right now with status quo, I think this is a team that competes for the playoffs next year. But I think they're looking to re-strategize, and it makes a lot of sense from their perspective as well.
And when this trade was initially made for Sergachev, the whole Drouin trade going back, what is it now? Like maybe close to like 6 to 7 years
5 years, yeah.
now. I thought Sergachev was going to be the guy who takes over Victor Hedman. So that's not the case at this point in time, and it seems like if Stamkos does walk, I do see Victor Hedman being named captain of the team, and he's going to be leading his team moving forward with some younger faces. But I like what both teams do here. Moving to Tanner Jeannot, this is a disaster for Tampa Bay. So they trade Cal
A
Foote,
lot of assets.
3 third-round pick, fourth-round pick, fifth-round pick, a 2024 second-round pick, and a 2025 first-round pick to Nashville to acquire Tanner Jeannot at last year's deadline.
Yeah.
Moving 2 seasons later, they trade him for a fourth-round pick in 2024, who they draft Jan Golicic at 118 overall, and they get a 2025 second-round pick. They do not get the same value for Tanner Jeannot that they gave up. And for me, yes, they do clear up cap space. They don't have to retain, which is a good thing. But looking back at what they gave up, they lose no matter what. If you do not get the same face value for Tanner Jeannot for what you gave up, you're going to lose in any other future deal that includes him. And that's exactly what happens here. They do get a bottom, 6 forward in Tanner Jeannot, LA, which is great. But he hasn't been playing good. He didn't work out in Tampa. He was fizzling out in Nashville. And, he had a one good season under the Nashville Predators. Can he bounce back? I don't really know, to be honest, at this point in time.
I think he might be a player that's overvalued just because I think a lot of NHL organizations, especially coaching staffs, are infatuated with guys who forecheck properly, and are follow throw hits to they finish off their plays, and they play like that traditional bottom six role to perfection, basically. And that's what Tanner Jeannot is. We're not, Tampa gave away a first round pick, which I found, and other picks, like you mentioned, which I found absolutely ludicrous for a player of his stature. But with their, teams are infatuated with that kind of style. Tampa thought this last year and even this year, getting a guy like Jeannot is going to help them in the playoffs. They got swept this year. And they look to move off of him because they know that other teams will almost value him the same kind of way. But they gave up so many draft picks in the process, which is just mind-boggling, and they don't get that much back for him. Yes, they get a second-round pick next year and the fourth-round pick, but compared to what they gave up, it's just a loss on Tampa's front. And the Kings are getting a guy that they're going to trust in their bottom six. Another competitive team in LA that is not a big team that is not afraid to throw the body, especially with the current regime. With the old regimes, kind of the current regime is taking over that same mindset. So he'll fit well with the Kings, but Tampa, I don't know what they were thinking initially bringing Jeannot in, and for LA's perspective, even giving a second round pick away for him, I think they're losing there, but they don't really care about draft picks.
Yeah, and also he's gonna play out his contract through the season, and then he'll be available to sign with whoever. So he'll be a UFA at the end of the season. So that's a good thing. So if it doesn't work out for LA, at least he walks. Another move, including the Utah Hockey Club. John Marino gets traded from the New Jersey Devils in exchange for a 2024 second round pick, which was Washington's pick initially. They used that pick to draft Mikhail Yegorov, and they get a 2025 second round pick, which belongs to Edmonton. And attached to John Marino is a 2024 fifth round pick that belonged to Colorado. And they selected Alish Czech. So, John Marino, probably one of the best defensive defensemen in the league. Didn't have the greatest season last year in New Jersey, but who really did? New Jersey really, fell short of expectations. But 2 years ago, when New Jersey was one of the best teams in the league, John Marino was fantastic, and they had just added him. To the offseason prior, and he would look like a main staple on New Jersey's decor for years to come. And it just seems that based off what happened last year, New Jersey, Fitzgerald's like, we're gonna make some changes. And there's another trade that involving the New Jersey Devils that we're gonna talk about later on in this video. But it looks like Fitzgerald was really not happy with the team last year. Made a coaching change, and now he's making a change in terms of the players from last year's roster. And John Marino, another big ad for Utah. They're really solidifying themselves on that blue line. $4.4 million signed for the next 3 seasons. He's going to be a UFA at the end of the 2026-2027 season. So they had Sergachev and Marino. I think it's very important to note that both these players are on long-term contracts. So they're getting guys where they don't have to worry about signing. They know their value. They know what they're being paid already.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
happy with those contracts and the players that they get. They feel like those are fair value for both players. And we know that Utah had a lot of defensemen to re-sign, heading into this offseason. And it seems
Mhm.
like they're going to be letting a lot of guys walk. And I think one of those guys is Sean Durzi. Because if you're getting John Marino and you're getting Sergachev, you already know those are going to be in your top 4. Sean Durzi, I think, was Utah's best defenseman last year overall. But he's a restricted free agent. Will he re-sign? Will they qualify him? I really hope so. Yusso Valimaki, I thought, did very well as well, and they cleaned them off waivers. Travis Dermott, I think he's in a walk, and Joshua Brown as well. But they only have 3 players under contract right now. So that's not really looking promising right now. They're going to
Yeah, well, I think Sean
their
Thursday
defense.
will resign. They will sign him to at least his qualifying offer. I'm not worried about that, but yeah, it's very interesting that they've done the right thing. I think you could agree that Utah is doing the right thing here by they've made their moves now before July 1st to address the defensive position, and they got 2 legit top 4 defensemen. Because yes, John Marino struggled at times last year, but he is in fact a steady top 4 defenseman. He's a defensive defenseman, but also with great abilities to move the puck. Great shutdown, plays in a shutdown role, suppresses passing lanes. Strong offensive chance suppressor, and he could chip in some points as he's done not only in New Jersey, but he's done it in Pittsburgh prior. But like from New Jersey's perspective on this trade, why do you think they got rid of? So why do you think they got rid of a player like John Marino, who wasn't is signed only for 3 more years, but is on a good contract, still relatively young? Like I'm trying to figure out what's the reasoning behind them wanting to go about this move.
It's actually fairly simple. They have someone else on their radar, and that's Brett
UFA?
Pesce, Carolina Hurricanes. That's a guy that they will sign on Monday, 100%. They were linked to him for a couple of months now, and I think that's going to be your, John Marino replacement. Pesce asked to be traded from the Carolina Hurricanes last offseason, if I'm not mistaken. That never happened. Played another year. Uh, you know, Played until his contract ended,
Yeah.
and now he's gonna hit the market. And New Jersey's been eyeing him ever since. So, um,
How much
Look,
is he commanding? I think Pesci commands at least 5.5 AV,
yeah, 5 to
probably at
6
least a
mil.
5-6 year deal.
Yeah, I would say that too. 5 to 6 million dollars, 4 to 6 years range. I would give him. This is a team that did not like what happened last year. They were supposed to be a playoff contender. You had Timo Meyer, you have Jack Hughes in his prime, Jesper Bratt in his prime, Nico Hischier. You have veterans like Palat, Hala, and your goaltending situation's an abysmal, which they had Markstrom, uh, I think like a week
Yeah.
ago. You have
Yeah.
Jake
About a
Lamb
week
at the
ago.
deadline, and they're reshaping this team. They're making a lot of changes, and I think this is going to be a big, um, statement to the locker room. And you also have to sign Dawson Mercer as well. He's an RFA. Thomas Nosek, I don't know if he stays. Chris Tierney, I don't know if he stays. Nolan Foote, I don't think he gets qualified. They don't have that many, guys to really focus on in terms of resigning. And, they made
Yeah.
another blockbuster deal that we're going to get into later on. But I think New Jersey is on the right path, or was on the right path until the second move they made today, which we'll talk about shortly. But do you have anything else to say before we move on to the next deal?
One thing I'll have to say is that if they do bring in, we predict they're gonna bring in a top free agent for their decor. That's what kind of we're insinuating. Maybe a guy like Brett Pesci. For them allocating cap wise to the defensemen, they're gonna pay a guy potentially over 6, and Luke Hughes is gonna be an RFA next year, so it could be it's the cap involvement for this deal is definitely prevalent for the John Marino deal.
So moving on to the next trade. Not really much to talk about here except it being a cap dump. Kevin Hayes gets traded from the St. Louis Blues to Pittsburgh with a 2025 second round pick attached that belongs to St. Louis. This is a guy that was traded off last offseason by Philly to St. Louis. Had a very average season with the St. Louis Blues. Why do the Pittsburgh Penguins acquire Kevin Hayes? This is an already aging team, the same way that the
They
Washington
don't want to let
Capitals,
go.
the same way that the Washington Capitals do not want to let go and staying competitive. The Pittsburgh Penguins are doing the same thing, but the thing is that Washington's doing it better, and we're gonna get into them after this deal. But they get Kevin Hayes at $3.5 million. He's not worth that, in my opinion. 32 years old. He has another year left on his contract. He's going to be a UFA at the end of the 2025-2026 season. He's he was being paid $7.1 million, but in the Philadelphia and St. Louis trade that happened last year, there was salary that was retained. So at least they're not getting him for for the full value of the contract. So at least that's a plus. But this is a team that's missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. They were literally in competition with the Carolina Hurricanes last offseason to see who was going to make the most signings. And it didn't work out for them. They signed guys like Lars Eller, and they bring in all these like quote unquote like old farts that are on the cusp of retiring or they're out of their prime just to keep Crosby, Malkin, and Letang happy to be competitive, but they don't even make the playoffs. It's 2 years in a row. At least the Washington Capitals made the playoffs. At least the Washington Capitals have promising prospects in their system that are making the team or that have already made the team this past season. Like Hendrix Lapierre and Michael
Potra,
and Potras
Protras.
as well, and McMichael.
Yeah.
And not only that, they're acquiring younger players as well that are not in their prime, but
They
on
have
their
legs left.
prime. Yes, and they already show that they're good quality hockey players. Dubois is a good hockey player, just on a
He's a
bad
great
contract
hockey player.
at the
He's
moment.
yeah, no, that Dubois could end up being well. I think off the bat that deal is very much a steal. You guys covered it in the previous video, but yeah, Washington, I think, has a good feel of how to, in the short term, turn a team that was on the cusp of, maybe falling off, and to kind of regenerate some hope a little bit. But Pittsburgh, with Kevin Hayes, he had 29 points last year. He's a very inconsistent power forward. He could very well end up producing like Lars Eller did in Pittsburgh last year. I think he's a little bit more skilled offensively than Lars Eller, but I from Pittsburgh's perspective, it's like, okay, yes, you want to remain competitive, you want to have your farewell with Letang, Crosby, and Malkin, but you also want to add difference makers to this team. And you lost one in Jay Gensel, so what are you doing to kind of add a legit top six option to either play on Jeannot or Crosby's wing, right?
And the thing is that like you look at this team and like they have players that are locked in for another year. So like who's leaving the team from last year? No one really. You have to sign Benstrom because if you let him walk, I think that's a mistake, considering how well Alex Nylander has been with the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's finally playing to, to the expectations that he was
Holtz,
drafted
yeah.
by. I think he was drafted 8th overall by Buffalo. I don't know what year it was, but maybe like 6 years ago or something like that. And he's playing fantastic. He was like a point per game player. So it looks bad if Emil Benstrom does not get qualified. You have Pierre-Olivier Joseph, very young defenseman. They have some guys in the system that, could make an impact. I mean, just looking at the list here, Sam Poulin was a guy that, they had high promise for, and, he hasn't been able to make the team. They have
There's not much there.
Valtteri
Jonathan
Stinin.
Gruden had high hopes, never really panned out. It's still 24 though.
You have Jack Rathbone, another guy that could make the team. It's just not looking. You have Owen Pickering that they drafted 2 years ago, but no one who
That's
moves the
their only
needle.
legit prospect.
Yeah, no one who moves the needle, unfortunately, and they don't have that much cap space either. So I don't know what they're planning to do, but did they get better? No, they got worse, in my opinion, and they're just getting older. So I mean, that's all the only coverage in terms of this deal. Not impressed with Dubas on as the president and general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins last season, and now this offseason. He's been doing a horrible job, in my opinion. But anyways,
Good.
moving on to the next.
He's got post January 1st, or maybe even close to, even before January 1st, either make a trade or do something. They have a little bit of cap space to work with. You mentioned no notable free agents, to resign. Joseph, the defenseman, is going to get a kind of a depth repairing AAV contract for market value for a guy of his age. But I wanted to, if you could pull up the Blues' salary cap situation, which what I wanted to mention for the Blues, because yes, there was Pittsburgh acquiring Kevin Hayes, and there's not much going back to the Blues other than some cap relief. But if you look at this, their core of their team is basically signed and sealed for at least this year and another year, except with the exception of Buchnevich, who hits unrestricted next year. But they have everybody signed. Not many notable free agents that they're going to bring back at all. Perry Kapanen, I doubt is resigned. Marco Scandella might sign elsewhere on a short-term deal at 34. You look at them; they have pretty much their entire core for next season, and they have 16 million in cap space. So this is another team with Doug Armstrong as the GM, who I think he's hasn't been afraid to be aggressive with trades in the trades or signings in the past. That I would really keep an eye on them to see what they do come July 1st. If they could be a destination for a notable free agent that will take this team potentially back to help this team get back to the playoffs next season.
Not only that, but they also landed a very underrated player in Alexander Texier. 24 years old, and they signed him to a 2-year deal. So, um, they only give up a fourth round pick for him. So I think St. Louis, I have high hopes for them
Yeah,
in the future.
Texas is a good player.
Yeah, I think they're gonna do well moving forward, and I like their core a lot. Uh, we'll see what happens, but I think there's been talks about like Colton Parayko being on the move. They were trying to move him for quite some time. We'll see what happens here, but they have cap space, and that's a good thing. And they don't have many guys to really sign, like you mentioned. So moving on to the other team we mentioned, the Washington Capitals. So Darcy Kemper gets traded to the Washington Capitals for Pierre-Luc Dubois. Will Charlie Lindgren be their starter? It looks like they're not going to do that. It looks like they're going back to something that did not work a couple years ago, which is the 1A, 1B goalie tandem with Eli Samsonov and Vitek Vanacek. Both guys did not last. They went to other teams. So, will it work this time with Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren? They are cheaper than Darcy Kemper. They are better than Darcy Kemper. And I think in this case, it will work. Logan Thompson was probably the second best rookie behind Matty Beniers 2 years ago, and he was a goaltender. Um, it's unfortunate that Aiden Hill, took his spot as the starting goaltender, but they were going through a goalie carousel for the last couple of years. Marc-Andre Fleury, Robin Leonard, Logan Thompson, Jonathan Quick, Aiden Hill, Laurent Bossois. Like, that's crazy. But they get rid of another goalie in Logan Thompson. Poor guy was signing, uh, you know, uh, hockey cards at the Sphere in Las Vegas while he got traded. And had no clue about it. And he was making some remarks saying, like, I guess you're gonna have to get in New Jersey, guys, because I'm not playing for Vegas anymore, unfortunately. And now he's a member of the Washington Capitals. What they what they give up is nothing compared to his value. Two third-round picks, one in 2024, which they've used to draft Pavel Mosievich, and the 2025 third-round pick um, as well. Logan Thompson going to Washington. Washington is staying competitive while retooling the right way. They're getting younger. They're getting quality players. They added Mangiapane, they added Thompson, they added Dubois. They are a better team than they were last season already, and I don't even think they're done. It was reported that Washington was going to be very active this offseason, and they've been probably the best team so far. I think they get an A plus for all the moves that they've done so far. I think they are currently the winners of this offseason. Um, yes, he needs to sign a new contract after the season, but that can easily be done. He was making league minimum. He wasn't even making $1 million. They can easily get this guy signed for under $5 million on a long-term contract. Last season he dealt with some injuries, unfortunately, but um, he's still a very good goalie, and he's very young as well. He's only 27 years old, so he's in his prime right now. This is where you enter as your prime, and people are like, "Oh, well, 27 is not young." Yeah, for a goalie, it is. It's harder to develop a goalie than it is to develop a forward or a defenseman. Goalies tend to become starting goaltenders from the ages of 25 to 26 years old. So I do believe that getting Thompson at 27 years old is a steal. 6'4" guy, he's a big frame of a goaltender, and he's gonna be a good supporting guy for Charlie Lindgren, who showed that he could play um, you know, top line minutes and more than 20 games in a season. And that's a good story for Lindgren too, because he was an undrafted player like Logan Thompson. Two
Yeah.
undrafted goaltenders as your goaltending duo. That's fantastic. And I do believe that they're in a better position. I think Washington has a good chance of making the playoffs again this year, but not in a sense where they barely squeaked in. I think this year they're solidifying themselves as a top dog for a wild card spot.
Yeah, well, I think so. Logan Thompson is that can definitely be the starter. Charlie Lindgren was fantastic. He was a part of the reason that they did qualify for the playoffs because he helped them steal some games and keep them in games that they should have either lost or not have won in post regulation. He was fantastic, but Logan Thompson is a goalie that on a very good Vegas team this past year played 46 games, 908 save percentage. The year prior with 915 played 37 games. He was integral for that team. Granted, Adin Hill got the knob in the playoffs, but he's been really doing his thing. And if you look at his numbers for the past 3 years, he's been very consistent. Even just in the 4 playoff games that he played this year, with a 921, he does his thing. He's very steady. My advice to Washington would be sign this guy right now before he has another great season, and you're going to have to sign him for something like a $5 million AAV on a long-term contract. I would sign him right now that his value is understated. In terms of the exchange, I think absolutely the Washington Capitals win this one. I don't know what Vegas. I know Vegas have their cap troubles for sure. They were tens and 15 and 18 million dollars over the salary cap going into the playoffs this past year. They tried some smart accounting tactics to basically finesse the NHL's salary cap rule, and it didn't work out for them. But they're a team that has always the tendency to do that when we're approaching the playoffs. But yeah, so at face value, like just the exchange itself, Washington are definitely winning this trade. 2/3 for Logan Thompson is just like there's more to be desired there. I think a lot of people, most fans would agree with that one as well.
I'd like to also add, sorry to cut you off, that Logan Thompson requested a trade from Vegas the day before the draft. He said that he was at a point in his career where he felt he needed a real chance, and staying in Vegas, doing and playing with Adin Hill and all those goalies that they went through the last couple of years, he felt like he was never going to have an opportunity. So that's why they traded him.
Yeah, well, look, if he's looking to be a clear-cut starter, then against the guy like that they re-signed and I was a hero for them and Adin Hill, they're always going to kind of have that 50-50 thing going on. But it's going to be this. It could be the same situation in Washington, but he gets a different opportunity to show what he's really made of. He's not going to be in front of that Vegas decor and that system anymore, so it's going to be interesting to see how he fares in Washington with the Caps. But yeah, I think that definitely has an impact on impacted his trade value, because you have a player who has a year left on his deal telling you he wants to leave. That definitely, whether you like it or not, the athlete himself speaking on it does impact the negotiations to a certain degree. Other than that, there's not much more to say. I think Washington upgrade their goalie position. Now they got 2 qualified goaltenders to roll with for this NHL season. And like you said, they're not done making moves. I wouldn't be surprised if they make a move now on their blue line. They don't really have the cap space right now, but I think they could maybe exchange some salary and throw in a couple more draft picks, because at the end of the day, Washington doesn't care about their draft picks. They care about giving Ovi the best chance for the next 2 years of his career, potentially before retirement. So for them, they just want to get this thing rolling and get as competitive as possible for these next 2 seasons.
Exactly. And I think they're doing a better job supporting Ovi than Pittsburgh is supporting Crosby. So next trade, Vinni Lettieri and a 2024 fourth round pick that was used to draft Elliot Grunwald. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Heads to Boston, and then Minnesota acquires Jakub Lauko and a 2024 fourth round pick, where they drafted Aaron Keviharu, who was projected in many people's mock drafts to be going in the first or second round. So he slides to the fourth round. So um, it's a very minor move for both teams. Um, they're trading, bottom six forwards in exchange for each other, and they're swapping fourth round picks. I don't really think there's much to analyze here. Lauko's 24 years old. He's an RFA at the end of the season. Um, posted decent numbers. 10.60 games, only played 5 playoff games where he recorded 1 goal. And Vinny, he is 29, so he's older, and he's on an expiring contract as well at the end of the season. So, depth move for both teams. He got 9 points in 46 games, and he did play for the Boston Bruins at one point in 2022, 2023. So he's going back to that team where he's only played 1 game, and he spent most of his time with the Providence Bruins in the AHL, playing 48 games, recording 49 points. So very minor move there. Here is
The teams just wanted to exchange picks. They had some guys that they had guys on their draft list that they've been scouting and they wanted to get it into a better range to acquire those guys in the fourth round of today's draft. I think that's essentially what it stems from.
Exactly. And here's a trade that is mind-boggling, pissed me off, pissed the New Jersey Devils fan base. And this is the Paul Cotter blockbuster deal that involves Alexander Holtz. Alexander Holtz was drafted 7th overall in his respected draft year. He was not given a true opportunity, really. He was being given what? Bottom 6 minutes in a New Jersey Devils team that was not so impressive last season. They get rid of a goalie in Schmid, who it's understandable because you already have Markstrom and Allen, so you have a goalie that is going to be sent to the AHL, who I think is capable of playing in the NHL. And he goes to Vegas and he becomes the backup goalie for Aiden Hill, replacing Logan Thompson. So I understand that aspect, but Holtz, they could have got a lot more for him. And this is a guy that was being dangled at this 2024 trade deadline. And they were asking the world for him. And this is what they settle on. I respect Paul Cotter. This is a guy who's won a Stanley Cup, a very underrated player, still young. But this is like, I understand if you trade Schmid and maybe like another prospect or a pick for Cotter and a third round pick, but the fact that like Holtz is basically a throw-in in this deal makes absolute no sense for me. This is an absolute fleece by the Vegas Golden Knights. Um, they get a guy who is not far off from Logan Thompson, even though I think Logan Thompson has more potential. But the fact that they get Alexander Holtz, this literally makes up for all those first round picks that they gave up in the past, like Nick Suzuki and so on and so forth. But man, they got a free first round pick here in this deal.
They're getting a young player who's still 22, was a high first round pick, scored, hasn't spent that much time in the NHL yet, but played the full 82 games in New Jersey this year with recording 16 goals, 12 assists, making it 28 points on the season. And just based off of the eye test of what I see with Alexander Holtz is somebody you don't want to give up on. There's some promise there. I think he's definitely going to flourish in Vegas. He'll probably be given a top 9 role out of the gate. Less pressure playing in a veteran team like that to produce right away. But I think that less pressure is just going to liberate him and let him do his thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if he has somewhat of a breakout season this year. And I don't want to repeat the same points you made other than about the other moving parts in this trade, but I definitely think Vegas really looks like they could fleece them with this trade.
Not only that, but they have a lot of UFAs, that I don't think they're going to be re-signed. Marcia So and Chandler Stevenson, those are two important pieces that look like they're going to be walking as UFAs. So you get Alexander Holtz, who is 22 years old, drafted 7th overall by New Jersey in his respected draft year. He looks to be the long-term plan to replace Jonathan Marchessault. Will it work out? Time will tell, but he has the potential. Then, in terms of the depth, you have Michael Amadeo, William Carrier, and Anthony Matha, who are all going to hit the market for sure because it was pretty much confirmed. But that just leaves them with really Chandler Stevenson to resign, or because he's a top, center, and that's something that I don't know what they do there. Do they give a bigger role to Nicolas Roy? You have Jack Eichel and Thomas Hurdle now as your top line centers.
Well, they have, not to cut you off, but they have their Jonathan Marchessault replacement, because getting Hurdle on that trade with term is like basically coming into this season is like a new signing for them. Getting a full training camp and really getting a chance to get accustomed to a new team. And yes, Thomas Hurdle's 30 years. I think there's your replacement right there. And you add Alexander Holtz, and you just add some an already pretty potent forward core, because you have your elite guys in Jack Eichel and Mark Stone, and then you got your secondary scoring with Hurdle, William Karlsson, Barbashev. Nicolas Roy is coming back. Now you add a guy like Alexander Holtz. It's smart business on Vegas's front. Anthony Manta is not gonna return. I think it's been reported already that he won't be re-signing with Vegas. But yeah, and they'll have a little bit of cap to maybe try to replace a guy like Chandler Stevenson, who you touched on just right before, was an important player for them, but they're priced out, and I don't even think they offered him a contract at this point. There's no way they were able to bring him back.
So ideally, this is what you project as, Vegas's top 6. So you have Jack Eichel, first line center. Second line center, you would have William Karlsson. So you're moving Hurdle to the wing to replace Marchessault, right?
Yeah.
And then you have Alexander Holtz, who comes in. So basically, Holtz and Hurdle are Jonathan Marchessault's replacement and Chandler Stevenson's replacement.
Yeah, you could look at it from that perspective too. They're basically refilling holes that are left off in their lineup. Okay. And what's interesting is that Thomas Hurdle could also play. I don't want to get too much into this, but Thomas Hurdle could also play the middle, and you could have a situation where they've done it this past year where they had William Karlsson drop down to the third line, and then you have 3 good centers that could maneuver on 3 different lines, and then you add some decent scoring wingers to either 3 of their wings, and then you have a well-rounded lineup that mixed with some guys like a Nicolas Roy, or some guys who have a bit of jam, some more physical complementary players, and that's how they build their team. They're building it through 4 lines, and they're really sticking to that philosophy now, because you add a guy like Holtz is going to have a great opportunity potentially playing on Thomas Hurdle or William Karlsson's wing, right?
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I didn't see it at first, but now looking at their options, they have a lot of interchangeable options. You have players that could play as centermen and wingers at the same time, that could be interchangeable. So that's, like you said, smart business decision. Marshall is also 33 years old, so it's kind of time to move on from him. And Chandler Stevenson, I think maybe before the Holtz trade, maybe they were probably interested in re-signing him, but now looking at Holtz and looking at their situation, I think he does indeed walk as a UFA. Looking at the Paul Cotter situation here in New Jersey, what are your thoughts on this in terms of New Jersey? Like, what
you're getting a good player in Paul Cotter, that's for sure. He's a good complementary player. Maybe a change of scenery will benefit him. He's going to get a chance at more consistent minutes, I feel, playing in New Jersey via playing in Vegas. But if you look at, I don't like the fact that they gave up on Holtz. That's my biggest thing. The goaltender, the goaltender is still young. You don't really know if this guy's going to pan out until 3 or 4 years down the line. But Alexander Holtz is especially he was their pick. He was, I believe Fitzgerald was the GM in 2022 when they the draft pick was made. So I don't know why they gave up on their guy.
Like both players are 22 and 24 years old. And I understand New Jersey wants to win now. So I understand the goalie decision of this trade, but it's mind-boggling what Holtz. And yeah, I don't think they get enough value with this trade. Um, okay, moving on to our next one, and I'm pretty sure this is our last big trade to cover. Chris Tanev goes to Toronto. Well, his rights do, and they give up Max Ellis. So they have his signing rights. He's not on a contract right now, and they give up a 2026 7th-round pick. We do know that Toronto is targeting Zadorov and OEL as their main targets on defense. But now having Chris Tanev, having the rights, they have an additional 2 days to talk to Tanev and his agent and get him signed before he hits the market on Monday. It's smart. They didn't give up much. I like that. Chris Tanev is one of the best defensive defensemen out there. Yes, age is somewhat of an issue. The thing is that will they overpay for him in terms of a contract? Will it be long term? What are they thinking here, Toronto? And they also have guys like Bertuzzi and Domi that they're talking to in terms of resigning. They want to potentially move Liljegren as well. He's a young defenseman. So I don't know. I do like the move for Tanev. I like that it's a good fit for both Tanev and Toronto. Um, and also it shows that Dallas was not interested in signing Tanev because Duchesne is interested in signing an extension with them, and Dallas is interested in bringing him back because he was fantastic. He was one of their top 4 players last year during the regular season. So, what are your thoughts essentially on this deal?
Well, from Toronto's perspective, what they want to do is, TJ Brody is gonna hit unrestricted free agency, and he was kind of like a stable defensive defenseman for them, and they're getting those qualities back. Also Chris Tanev is incredible on the penalty kill. They're getting those qualities back with a Chris Tanev, who we should expect that if they're trading for his rights, they're definitely gonna they probably have already an agreement with the player, just waiting to get announced, or it's going to be agreed upon in maybe the next week or so. And I would suggest that the AUV for Tanev probably drops down a little bit because yes, he's hitting the open market, but I think he knows that he wants to play in Toronto, and he knows their situation as a competitive team, and they will not be able to offer a market dollar. So I think maybe the AAV goes down. Maybe we get a 4.5 on a 3 or 4 year deal for Chris Tanev. They, like you mentioned, Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi are hitting free agency. I see Max. I see Max. One of these two guys are going to be resigned. I'm not saying Max because of Max Domi. I'm saying either one of the two will come back. I think it's more along the lines of a Tyler Bertuzzi, because I think he has a desire to come back, and I think Toronto were happy for what he accomplished in his first year over there.
I would say the opposite, in my opinion. I think Domi's that stays because the family ties. I thought he was a way better fit. I know Bertuzzi had a hard time at the beginning of the season until he started to get things going, but I think what Bertuzzi.
Domi, I will disagree with you. I think Domi was a ghost during the playoffs.
Yes, okay.
I think
Fair
Bertuzzi is somebody who's able to elevate during the playoffs, and Bertuzzi was also a 20-goal scorer for them this year. Granted, he's playing alongside one of the best centers in the NHL, but Bertuzzi went there, and I think he did his job as a secondary scoring option. And I think with Domi, is same situation. It was in Arizona. There was a little bit more to be desired. That's why they traded him to Montreal. And in his destinations after that, there's always that thing missing with him. There's always that expectation that he could be a little bit more, based on what he's shown in the past. He had that 70-point year in Montreal, but then he kind of fizzled out. There's always something more, and unfortunately for him, I think he'll be looking for another destination to be moving his family. Look,
Yeah,
his dad is a franchise legend, obviously for the Leafs. You know, there's ties there, but I don't see this relationship with them going forward. It's a business first, and I don't think he's gonna come. I think he's commanding value on a contract that Toronto's not comfortable to dish out for him.
fair points. And I would like to add two more things before we conclude our long coverage of the trades that happened. Um, Beck Malenstein was a minor trade today. 26-year-old player goes to Buffalo Sabres. Well, his rights to. He's going to be a restricted free agent, so that's somebody that they're going to have to lock up. And in terms of what they give up is a second round pick, I think, and they drafted Cole Hudson, Washington. I thought that was fantastic work from Washington once again. I wanted to just add that little
That's because
quick.
you love Lane Hudson.
It's not just that. It's also like I'm very like you look at Washington, like you would think they have very little to work with, and they're somehow turning into a very competitive team again, a very serious team. And I like that. And I do believe that this is a team that will surprise a lot of people. And Vegas, credit to them as well. I think in terms of the trade department so far, I think Vegas and Washington are the biggest winners so far in the offseason in terms of trades, in terms of the draft. I'm not going to go too much into it, but I think Montreal were one of the biggest winners, Minnesota being another one, and even Calgary too, to a certain extent. They had a pretty good draft class as well. Um, and yeah, I thought it was a very entertaining draft year. A lot of big trades, probably the best overall like draft in terms of trades and draft picks, maybe in the last 5 years. Um, I would say maybe the 2022 draft was probably the second most entertaining, where you had like Kirby Doc being traded and Vitek Vanacek and all those other guys. But I thought this was a very, very good um, draft, very entertaining, and I think a lot more fan bases were happy than not. And that's it. That's basically my analysis on the draft as a whole in terms of the trades that were completed.
Yeah,
Also,
definitely exciting.
yeah, also two other things I forgot to mention. Ryan Suter and Jeff Skinner were bought out as well. So they will be hitting the market come Monday as UFAs. So do you have anything else to add, Zach, before we conclude today's video?
Well, I think just the whole, regardless of all the moves, the trades were added this element of craziness to the draft, and also just the excitement around all the moving parts around the NHL. But just the draft itself, there were a lot of off the board moves, especially in the top 10. Most notably, my Ottawa Senators taking Yamanchuk with the 7th overall pick and skipping on St. Parik, Sam Dickinson, Siliev, and Ziv Bayum. But even with Philly with their move getting Jet Lamenko, I feel like I'm butchering his name, but in the comments, you guys could feel free to roast how if I botched his name. But it was very interesting. Siliev also big defenseman, touted to be kind of compared to Victor Hedman. I think great prospect, and he was expected to go in the top 5, and he didn't. Obviously, Demidov going to the Canadians, who is arguably the second best player in the draft, but there's some uncertainties there. It was a very entertaining draft, and it was hard to know what to expect. I say top 10, but for the whole first round, there were really some surprises. So it was really exciting as a fan to be able to witness that, I feel.
Yeah, and I think come Monday, when we cover the free agency, I think that's going to be exciting as well. But we'd just like to say thank you guys so much for watching this video. We hope that you guys had an awesome experience, whoever went to the Sphere, which is probably the last in-person draft for now. I think everything's going to be online moving forward. So what a way to cap it all off in person. If this is the very last in-person draft ever, I don't think so. Maybe we might see an in-person draft again, but what an experience. Great trades, great um, draft picks, a lot of brothers and sons of NHL legends were drafted in this year's draft. Jerome McGinley's son, Sako Koivu's son, Protas's brother, Lane Hudson's brother, and there's probably so many others. But we just want to say thank you so much for following our 2024 NHL entry draft coverage in terms of draft picks and mock drafts and our analysis on the trades. And we hope to see you guys soon. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Young Guns podcast. Thank you so much once again.